Okay, so it's running. Let me get into the virtual. So for those that came later, I'll reiterate that I had news that will probably be in this room will be used next quarter too. Probably won't be back in our regular labs until spring quarter, which is sad. Why? Probably the only place would be where like that one networking room, the Cisco room, 3 to 180 is still open, and the offices should remain open. What? It's in the same place. Yeah, it's open. It's a little bit weird because all the desks are in the middle of the room because they're tearing the walls up around it.
Oh, wow.
But it's there. And my office is still where it was, although, and I have mixed feelings about this, I probably will be moved into Mike Sinclair's old office. So, but not for a while. Okay, so we're running. I'm going to maximize. I'm going to zoom inside of here. Well, actually, let's just do this. Okay. So what I want to bring up, we've been bringing up SQL Server management thing.
Mhm.
I'm going to bring up MySQL Workbench. And that's what we want. That's what we downloaded last time. If you didn't, after I go through this, I'll help you get this downloaded. The Workbench, MySQL Workbench, and MySQL. So it should come up looking something like this, right? So what this is really a lot like the SQL Management Studio. It is a front end to MySQL. It is not the database. MySQL runs as a service, just like SQL Server did. For the most part, database engines do not have graphical front ends. You can build them. For Microsoft, the only front end is basically the Management Studio, which Microsoft provides. This is provided by Oracle and provided for MySQL, but there are lots of others for MySQL. If you've ever done PHP admin, that's another front end for MySQL. You know, there are other ones for that. Partially because it's open source, anyone can build something. Microsoft traditionally has not been open source, although they have in the last couple of years dived into the open source market a lot. They're trying to make more of their stuff open source and use more open source tools. Because they seem to have won the war, the open source world. Developers like that anybody can develop on it, work on it. So this is a front end, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on local instance, and it's going to ask me my password. And I told you, as I hope you did, to make your password really easy, like mine is password. Although it's password with the capital A, SSW0RD1, but whatever your password was. Thing being that if you don't remember your password, I can't help you. So I'm going to do, if you don't have it, then you might have to reinstall. Now, one of the things you can do, which is not a good idea in real life, but you can save your password. Hope I typed it right, though. Now notice this is localhost, and if you had a full edition of SQL Server, it would also be localhost. It's just the standalone machine on standalone database on your machine. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, a lot of which we will not mess with. There's a SQL window right here where you can write SQL queries. Okay? And there's a few databases down here. They're called schemas, but they are databases. One of them, I'm going to click down here on SQL, I guess. You don't have any sample databases? You might have been a choice in this, but if you don't have those, okay. So just click on that. Okay, so as I said, I just wanted to show, this isn't that important, but they do have a sample database. And it's essentially a DVD rental place. So I would consider that kind of dated since they're almost all extinct, except for maybe the red box type. But if you wanted to do like use SQL, is that big enough to see? No. I just want to set the font, edit, preferences, SQL editor, timeouts and stuff. I just want the font. Query editor, object editor, SQL execution. Oh, there it is, fonts and colors. SQL editor, will it let me change that? What if I change this to 15 or 18? Nothing, it looks like. I was hoping it would increase font size. All right, so I'm going to just do that. I'm going to execute, and down below it says use SQL, and it has a green check mark. And then I'm just going to do select star from actors. Again, this is just to show you what's here from actor. And you can see that it has some of the same. And if I select that, which makes it go invisible, but if I run it, it will give me a list of all the actors. And you could whiten this out. You know, you could make it so that you can see this. Like this isn't being used and it's taking up a lot of room. So I can move that way over there. Okay. Notice I did use semicolons there. This is MySQL, it wants them. So I just wanted to show you that was there. And eventually we'll be over in this section and we'll make our own database. The other system is sys and world. And world is basically just an empty database. Well, no, it has city, country, language. But that's about it, just has that. And then the system database, which is doing a lot what the system databases did in SQL Server, right? Keeping track of users, keeping track of databases, things like that. For the most part, leave that one alone, right? Just leave the system database alone. All right, so that's part of it. But I want to show you how to make a model, how to get started on that. And then we'll talk about what the database is going to look like. After we've created our database, which I'll show you how to do later, it'll come back over here and you can edit it. Right? You can change. You either use SQL or there's a little form you could do. Like if I go into actor here, I could do. Actually, I don't have to do that. I just have to mouse over it, and there's a little form icon. And if I click that, where did it go? I'd have to scroll down here, I think. But I could add stuff to it. On an empty one, it just gives you, come on, get me down to the bottom. At the bottom of this, you could add records. There's got to be a faster way to the bottom. I should have maybe done one without. Is there new?
Yeah.
Where?
Can you see edit?
Edit.
And the plus one on the right.
On the right.
Right, yeah. And the second to the right. Yeah. Right. There's like a little
Plus and the minus. So
yeah, there's a plus.
It's right next to the edit. Yeah. Oh, these plus. Then it takes you to the bottom.
Yeah.
And you can add a row down here. Okay. I was having trouble seeing. I was looking for a plus and a minus, not a form plus. Yeah.
So I don't understand fully. Are we going to use this instead of the other program? And
For this one, yes. So what I want to show is the first one we did is Microsoft product. So it's Microsoft SQL Server, which is actually one of the premier databases in the world, along with Oracle and etc. This is MySQL, which is used a lot with web pages, particularly. So I want to show two different examples of softwares. So the first one is Microsoft software, and I'll help you get all that set up if you need. And then the second one is MySQL. So it's a different product.
just one of them, or what are we going to continue?
So we finished with the SQL Server. We created a database. We went through the cycle. We're going to do the same kind of cycle with MySQL. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So the information that we have from SQL Server, can that be exported and imported into this?
Not easily. The answer is yes and no. So the table structures would have to be modified because they name all their data types differently. Or not all of them, but several of them differently. So you'd have to change the names of all the data types. The data itself, if you did it like exported it as comma delimited and then imported it, could be imported, right? It's not a simple thing, though. It's a multi-step thing with some
Not
cleaning.
easy just to sit up and do it.
Yeah, but we're going to do a different database in here. All right, so one of the things that MySQL Workbench has that is very nice is I'm going to say File, New Model. All right, and I might, where's my zoomer? I might zoom down just a hair for this. All right, so a model here is where you can do something like we did in Visio, where you design the database. It's a nicer designer than Visio. And one of the reasons that I do like this one as opposed to the one in SQL Server, when you use that designer, it creates the database. The instant you save the dialog box, it creates the database. That's not a good way to plan, right? Because if you need to make changes, I think you have to delete things from the database. A lot of you found that when you rename things, it totally screwed everything up, right? So the nice thing about this is that we can make a new diagram that is not a database until we decide we want it to be. There is a point after you're done with the design and you've got it to where you want it to go, you can say forward engineer and it will turn it into a MySQL database. But until you say that, you're just working with a diagram, right? And the diagram is movable. unlike SQL servers, right? So you can say it's saved as a separate file. You can take that file and you can load it into my SQL Workbench at home or whatever, so that the model is movable. The database itself is still a bit of a pain to move, but the model itself is movable. So I'm going to just create a little test database to show you what that is going to be like. So when you get here, you have these property windows. They're not all that different from things. And this is, your first database is called MyDB, but you can change that. So I'm going to click on that, maybe double click it. And there are properties down here for the MyDB. So I'm going to change the name. Anybody have a good database you want to do right now? Why? I thought I heard something.
Baseball.
Baseball? I don't know that much about baseball anymore. So we could do, whoa, it's a trip. You can comment it if you want. You don't have to, but that's just basically comments for it. We could do football too. That was a good game Sunday, by the way. All right. So notice it says baseball now. Okay, so this renames it, and you can actually do everything in this mode if you want. You could add a table. Notice it has add table, add view, add routine. But what I'm going to do now that I've renamed it is I'm going to add a diagram. So I'm just going to double click that. And it gives me a diagram not that different from the SQL Server diagram, except there are a little bit of differences. And I'll show you some of them. But let's just drag a table on here. So this is a new table. And you can drag it on. You can drag it on and click. Or you can, it said like Control T would put one on there, right? So this table, if I open it, it doesn't have any content, but it's selected. And down below, which I can't see because I'm in this big zoom. Where is it? My properties.
On the left?
Maybe. Let me do it. All right, so double click it. There it is. So you can do a column name. So this table, let's call it teams or team. Column name, I can just choose. So let's do okay, so I want to click in there so it selects. Notice what it does by default. It does ID team, which you can leave if you want. That's how they do their primary keys. And you can assign data types here. One of the reasons why you have to assign data types during the design phase here is that, as I said, we can take this and turn it into a database. So if I want it to be a primary key, that's a primary key. If you want to know what that is, if you mouse over it, it gives you a description. So we want it to be primary key. NN is not null, right? Primary keys can't be null. If you want it to be auto increment, see auto increment, you can just click here, right? And it'll make it an auto increment. So it'll make an auto number. So that's a team. And then let's do an int is the data type, right? This says team column. I wouldn't leave that there. I'm going to do team name. Varchar I'll do 255. And I'm going to make it not null, but I'm not going to make it unique or actually, what is UN? Oh, unsigned data type. We're not going to worry about that. Okay. So one of the things about, and we won't spend a lot of time on the data types now, but you will want them right before you make the database. Varchar in MySQL is the same as in Varchar in SQL Server. It's already Unicode. Okay. Anything else we'd want to know about the team real quickly? What?
The city.
City would be good. I'll just say team city. I'm just going to change this. And you can change it here, or you can change it down in the, and I'll leave it, make it not null too, so required. Okay. Notice that there's other things you can do down here. You can do indexes. You can set foreign keys. You can do triggers, partitioning, options, inserts. We'll, as I said, mostly ignore those. Let's do. All right, so there's our thing. Let's do another table, ideally one that's related to it.
Team roster.
We could do team roster. That'd be good. Let's just call it roster. Okay. Did I just change that to roster? I did. All right, so we'll double click this one and we'll change that to roster. And I'm going to, so it's going to say ID roster. I'll make it primary key auto increment. I'm just going to do this because I'm not actually going to make this database. So I just want to show you a couple of things and then we'll talk about the.
So the primary key box should be checked.
For the first one, yes, it should be. Let me change this real quick first. And what do we want to know about? So we'd want to know what date they were added, right, to the roster. We might want to know other things too. Well, we're going to do the team ID, the ID team, yeah. But I'm actually not going to type that in because this will do. So I'm going to change this to date. And I'll make both of these required. Okay. So then what I want to do is I want to make a relationship between these, between team and roster. And I did not type in the foreign key. You have to in SQL Server. You don't necessarily have to here. I'm going to do the one to many. And this is important. You want to do the dotted one, the dashed one, not the solid ones. They do actually have slightly different meanings if you're being strict. The solid one means that the foreign key is also part of the primary key of the child table. You don't want that. It makes a real big mess. So you want the dashed one. I'm going to, and you want to click on the foreign key side first, which is the opposite of SQL Server, and then click on the, so I'm going to do there and there. Oh, never mind. So let me delete this. All right, so let me get it again. I spent too long. So I want to bring that out. I want to click here and here. And notice it added a foreign key, and it actually does mark it with a red diamond. So it says team ID, team int. It doesn't give it the same name. You can override that if you want. The other thing that's weird, and I'll help you when you get there, because first of all, I would, when we do this again, I would make the entities and then worry about the relations afterwards. The other thing that's the opposite of SQL Server is you go foreign key to primary key with your clicks. In SQL Server, you always drug from the primary key to the foreign key, right? So it's always the opposite. This is backwards from that. But it got it right, one to many, right? And it's a nicer looking, and things, once you've hooked them, you can move things around. And you can save the model at any time. Yeah.
What company makes MySQL?
Oracle.
Oracle makes Oracle and MySQL?
Yes, partially because they bought Sun Microsystems, which was a company that made MySQL. So when they bought Sun, they inherited MySQL. And so they sell both right now. MySQL is mostly free. There is a enterprise level version of it that costs money. So what they usually say, the way they market is you buy an Oracle database and you use MySQL for, kind of side databases. Typically, when you have a big transaction database like, say, Amazon uses Oracle. You don't want to do your analysis and stuff online because you don't want to slow down the transactions. So you offload the data for analysis, and they would advertise MySQL for that kind of thing, for offloading the data from Oracle. Also, as a backend for websites, MySQL is probably a little bit more economical than Oracle. Again, Amazon, they have the whole world there. So Oracle cost tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars for an installation. And this is free. That's another thing. But they have, one of the complaints about Oracle owning this is that they haven't developed it as much as they probably.
The reason I was asking is because I tried to use it like 5 years ago. It's so much better.
5 years ago?
Yeah, 5 years ago.
Yeah. I can't hear. You have to click it. And then click here. Yeah. It's inside. Get this backwards. Okay. And then, we'll go for the new diagram. And then put a table in there, you can put that. And then we can do click down at the column. And then, the other thing is I'll come back. That gives you the start of it.
I don't mean
Question?
Sorry.
That's okay. Anyone, how are the things on this side? It should, I think.
I mean, yes.
So I just wanted to show this, because this is what we'll be doing next, is designing this inside and in here, all right, the MySQL Workbench. When you're totally done with it, the design, but don't do it until you're done, there's a forward engineer. And the forward engineer will generate an SQL script, which will then create the database. Yeah, forward engineer. Reverse engineer is if you have an existing database and you want to make a diagram of it. Yeah.
What happens if you like fail the design?
It'll throw errors, right? And I would be willing to bet you that most of you will have errors the first time you try to forward engineer, maybe the first 2 or 3 times you try to forward engineer. It'll give you error messages, and then you can kind of figure out what's going on.
And reverse engineer will allow you to.
Reverse engineer is if you have an existing database,
Yeah.
it'll allow you to create a model of it.
Okay, so at that point, you just add more to the diagram.
You can, although it gets a little bit tricky if you forward engineer onto something that's already there. It tends not to show it, rather than like replace it. It tends to blend them, which makes a mess. So it's almost better to delete if you don't have a bunch of data in it.
Yeah.
It's better to delete the original and then forward engineer again. You have to be careful reverse and forwarding back and forth to what changes you make, because it doesn't do always what you expect it to do. Yeah. If you forward engineer, it'll take this design. I guess I could do it. We got team and roster. Again, I wouldn't do this until you're done with the design. So I'm going to forward engineer. All right, most of this you can just leave as is. I'm going to do next. There are some options here. Again, mostly I'm going to just do next. It's going to turn it into an actual database. When it's in the design, it's not a database. It's just the design. So it creates SQL for the 2 tables that we have. And then if I say next, and if everything goes well, it says it forward engineered successfully. So what that means is that if I go back here and I go to home, there's a nice little home icon. Actually, if I just go to local instance, now it doesn't show this right away, but if I click the little refresh thing here, notice it has baseball and it has two tables, roster and team. So the nice thing about here is once you're done with the design, you don't have to copy the whole design back in. It'll just do it. Visio used to do that. It used to be possible in Visio to design a database and then click a button in the menu or menu option and it would forward it to SQL Server. Doesn't do that anymore, partially because they wanted to make it backwardsly compatible with all the XML designers. Like SVG and all of that. So when they made it compatible, they took out all that kind of functionality too. All right. So this is just an overview of Workbench. You'll really get the feel for it when you actually build it. I don't expect this to stick totally yet. Does that make sense? So let me go. I'm actually going to unzoom for a moment. Still at 300%. All right, so I'm going to bring up the canvas and we'll talk about what the actual assignment is. So I'll zoom this up. So we'll log into Canvas. All right. So I'm going to go to the modules again. Why is modules not? Oh, that's because it's 110. Never mind. So if we go down to MySQL, there's a Python Club PDF. And what this is a description, and maybe I can make this a little bigger. It's going the other way. Wait, it's making it bigger, I see. Let's go back. You have to zoom it internally. Is that readable from the back? Okay. So basically, this is like a school club, and it's a database for a school club. They meet weekly to discuss Python. I wish it would have word wrap. They host meetups and speakers, and they want to build a website for their club. And then this will be the background database. Again, we're not going to build the website. This is just the back database. The purpose of the database is basically to be a content management system for the club. It should track all the meeting times and places, summaries of the meetings that have already happened, all the speakers and presenters presented by the club, as well as upcoming meetups and events around town. I'll wait for the thing. Anyway, hosted by other organizations. And it should also track the resources and tutorials posted by members and some general announcements as well. This is one reason I did this as a topic is that this is typical of what MySQL is used for. If you've ever done WordPress, MySQL is at the heart. WordPress is MySQL, CSS, and PHP. That's essentially what it is, with some built-in templates. So MySQL is at the root of that, and MySQL, as I said, is at the root of a lot of websites. Content management system, because it works so well with PHP, although PHP is, as I've said before, my least favorite language. So these are some basic rules. Only members can post announcements. So one of the things you'll probably need is a members, right? Keep track of who the members are. And then only club officers can post meetings and meeting summaries. So among the members, some will be officers. Club members can report announcements as inappropriate, but only club officers can, I think that's cancel them or remove them. Any club member can add a notice of a meetup or an event, and anybody can publicly view the site. And don't worry about the tasks too much. Those were actually from other quarters where I did this differently. But the idea is to create a design for this club. You know, what are the entities that will be needed? What are the fields that would be needed in that? And what, you know, the relationships between those. It would be a lot easier, I realize, if you actually had people to talk to, you know, if you didn't have to invent some of this. But I think it could go, again, one of the things I would suggest, I was going to actually, is that you should work with other people on this. If 2 or 3 of you turn in the same design, that's fine. It'll be graded individually, but I really think it's more productive to work in groups, talk to people about it. That's the assignment. The first assignment is just to create a rough entity relation diagram for this and to build it in Workbench. Okay. So before you even do that, I would talk about just think about what's required. And don't create the database until we've gone through the revised entity relation thing. And then once I've given a kind of an approval, you can fix it. They don't all have to be the same. Depending on how you interpret the rules, there can be some variations in how the database works. Does that make sense? So it's a second shot through. We're going to go through the same process. Rough draft, a more finalized version. We're going to add some data, and then we'll do some more SQL. I'll expand the SQL a little bit for this when we go through that. I would suggest, like, if you didn't, so if you're close to finishing up the other one, it's fine to finish that up. If you have a long ways to go for the other one, I would start on this and then just kind of work the others in as you have time. Yeah. Depends on how far back you are. I mean, if it's just finishing up the queries, you could do that. But
You're still starting data.
yeah, well, it depends. I mean, I just don't get too, if you're here, it'd be good to keep up on this, and then we can work up the stuff that's behind more slowly, you know, as time comes up.
Yeah, because I haven't started the queries yet.
Right, then you have a SQL data and all of that. So you're not too bad of shit.
But should I just wait with that and follow this?
Yeah, follow with this, and as I said, I think you can probably, so you have the video in there? You're on
I don't know, it took me a little bit longer than 25 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah.
Well, some of it is because I just didn't know the time.
So if you guys are, you know, if you're at the point where you basically just need to do that last thing with the queries, you're in pretty good shape. If you have farther back, then we can catch it up. One thing we didn't talk about was security on these two, but I might do that as a separate thing.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
You know how you were showing the 2 tables? And,
Yeah.
If you're doing the tables and you're not done designing it, you just do a file save? And
Yes, actually, that's a really good point. Let me show this real quickly. Let me zoom back up
Okay.
because this is actually really important. Thank you for asking that. If you've got your design, so let's go back to the model and the diagram, and you're not done, which I don't expect you to be done necessarily at the end of this. So you can save the model. So save model, probably save model as, and you can give it a name, like this would be baseball. And notice it has an MWB extension. It's an actual model. You can save this. Not entirely sure.
And in documents, it says-
So it's in recent files. This PC, it's in document. So this file is movable, right? You can take this to another machine, and if you have Workbench on it, you can load this document and have the model.
So just a file.
It's just a file. Unlike the SQL Server, diagram, this file is movable, and you can load it, and it will load, and the model will be there. This is also how you can move the structure of the database. You can't move the data this way, but if you have a good model, you can take that home, and the database will be there minus data. There are some ways to export it with data, which we'll do later because we shouldn't be there yet. But just like SQL Server, it's a bit of a pain to move a MySQL database. They're not meant to be moved, they're server centric. Yeah.
If you want to work on this on like a different machine, how much storage do you need?
This isn't very big. I haven't looked. We could look at, it'd be hard to tell. So I don't know if I can get, so if I do, MySQL, I don't know that everything is in here. It says it's 679 megabytes. Or 687 megabytes. What's big with databases is usually not the database software, except for SQL Server, because I put everything in it. It's the data. Yeah.
Since we're
And we're not going to make anything that's very big. If it gives you any, MySQL was the original basis of Facebook. It's not anymore, they've changed the database. The original Facebook was written on MySQL with PHP code. I don't think they were worried about security. Yeah.
What is Facebook? What does Facebook use?
They originally it was MySQL. Now they use they have a NoSQL database that they made themselves. Oh look, I want to say its name is Cassandra. Oh. I'm still zoomed really big. And what date is this? Oh, this is old.
yeah, that's 6 years old. A lot happens in Facebook years.
I was always,
So they're still using MySQL some. They've also got Cassandra and Haystack. As I recall, I think Cassandra is the one they made. Maybe not. Said that was Apache. So it looks like they have several databases that they're using, which makes sense. They've got an awful lot of data.
For the quick cost, they're using different databases. It's not the one only.
Right. So they're still using MySQL for a lot of stuff. Haystack for images. Varnish for photos also. But I know that, so Cassandra's a NoSQL database. Oh, and they're also building one called Apollo. This is, I think, where they're going to use it to so there's an Apollo database that they're designing that's meant to replace MySQL in their systems. Anyway, let me come around. I'm going to kill the video now.